Welcome everyone, Costin here with the discussion about mods in Total War Warhammer 3. And in this particular video I am going to be talking about the most essential mods from my personal perspective. So you can have a more enjoyable experience while playing the game, while still retaining the current core of vanilla. So I'm not talking here about complete overhaul mods of any kind of description. I am just talking about quality of life changes, really, as I personally see them. Now, the first mod, as I am playing through the siege battle, the first mod to talk about is going to be defensive supplies removed, basically. And what this does is that it removes defensive supplies from siege battles, from minor settlement battles and siege battles in general. Some people have reported issues with getting this to work, but what this does is make these minor settlement battles far more enjoyable than they've been so far in Warhammer 3. You know, I have mixed opinions, to say the least, about the way that the settlement battles play out, but I think a lot of people can agree that the barricades and towers do make the experience far worse. The problem with the towers is that they're just... it's just a terrible gameplay decision. It's like, it's a tower defense. It turns the game into a tower defense if you're playing on the defensive. Although the attacker generally has a lot of advantages when besieging one of these minor settlements. But if you're playing a campaign yourself, you can get tired just like constantly attacking a settlement, having to deal with towers, and having to deal with the barricades. The problem with the barricades in Warhammer 3 is that the pathfinding is just really terrible around them, and so dealing with them, with said barricades, ends up being a pretty miserable experience in a lot of ways. So with their removal, and let's be clear on this, this is not going to fix all the issues when it comes to siege. Like, for instance, over here, you can see that my handgunners are just flat out struggling to shoot, but gunpowder units do currently have that particular issue in minor settlement and siege battles. They really are terrible when it comes to it. But yeah, what this mod does is, like, it just makes things so much better because you don't have to deal with the constant barrage of barricades being built by the AI. Like, the AI will just constantly build barricades, and it will make your... it won't make the battle per se harder, it would just make things more annoying. So just removing that from the game means that you can actually enjoy these sieges and settlement battles significantly more, I feel, because you're no longer fighting the pathfinding, so to speak, you're fighting the enemy. Sure, there's still going to be issues with the layouts, they're not perfect, but I really don't understand where Creative Assembly came with this idea of, let's make minor settlement battles. Okay, but because we have... I guess the logic was because they had a bunch of factions that didn't have a way to defend themselves from ranged, like the demon factions, the corn factions, they decided, okay, we need to give these guys some way of defending themselves, and that's why I think they added the towers. But the problem is, it isn't a really good mechanic. It hasn't been a good mechanic, and right now with so many battles being minor settlement and siege battles, it generally isn't a fun experience to deal with from my personal perspective. Removing siege towers and removing, like, there's a mod to just remove siege towers. There's a mod, this mod removes both siege towers and barricades. Personally, I find the barricades more frustrating. They hamper me far more than the siege towers. More often, because the siege towers you can, the towers, the defensive towers you can destroy, right? The barricades are much harder to destroy. Now some people will disagree with the mentality of just removing the barricades, thinking that it should be part of these battles. The problem is, with the pathfinding broken as is, with the enemy just, with units, enemy units just being able to move through barricades when they're trying to attack a barricade, it leads to a really terrible experience. And you know, a lot of battles can be a lot more fun if you're not constantly having to rush. Like, sieges should be more deliberate affairs than they currently have been. See, the problem with siege battles and minor settlement battles is because of the towers. The issue that comes with it is you're pretty much just Zerg rushing. Like, you don't, like, the best strategy you have when it comes to them is you really want to Zerg rush, because if you don't Zerg rush, the defender will just get, like, the attacker always wants to rush as hard as possible, the defender always wants to buy as much time as possible. With sieges, with the removal of barricades and towers, that no longer really works, because the defender can't just constantly block off routes and constantly set up towers to do damage. They actually have to fight the battle. Now, of course, there's going to be significant consequences if you do decide to remove barricades. As I've stated, the attacker already has all of the advantage, but I can tell you, just like playing this very early game battle and winning it, this was a lot more enjoyable for me to play. I've done a lot of minor settlement siege battles, and I just get frustrated by the constant barrage of towers that I have to deal with. Not having to deal with that for once can make a campaign significantly more enjoyable than it otherwise would be, because you get more flexibility in battles. You're not the pathfinding is improved because you no longer have barricades blocking off all routes, and it might even improve things for the AI in terms of its behavior, because the AI itself struggles with even its own barricades when it comes down to it. So yeah, that's the first one to talk about. Now, the second mod to talk about here in this particular video is the Toggle Fog of War mod. Something people may have noticed in all of my videos, because it is something I use to talk about campaign guides in particular, and to talk about races. And what it does is just it removes the Fog of War. It's a toggle. It adds a UI element. Obviously, there's been quite a bit of work put into it and making it working when you're changing the UI. Look, it fits in very nice with the game is, and all it does really is just toggle the Fog of War. Now, it isn't perfect. It's not going to color code the territory, for instance, on the map, but really this can be an essential tool when you're looking to plan a campaign in Total War Warhammer 3. Like, when you're starting a campaign, it can give you a good overview of the starting situation. Yes, you can use it to cheese, you can use it to cheat, you can use it to, you know, always know where the enemy is. That's a bad way of using it from my perspective. A better way of using it is just to have a tool to really plan your initial campaigns. Or if you're curious later on in a campaign and you don't want to send agents and all that around the map, it can be a tool of telling you, well, okay, I'm playing as the Empire. What's going on in Cathay? Just, you know, curiosity's sake. It's not something that's going to affect my campaign in any way. But it's like, okay, who's winning in Cathay? Who's winning in the Southlands? Who's winning in Lustria? It can be interesting just panning around the map like this and seeing how everyone is doing from the very start until the very end. I would advise using it. I would advise against using it as a tool to just cheat, to like, oh, the enemy is marching an army against me, better prepare for that. I would strongly advise against that. However, I do think that it can be a really nice tool to plan your campaigns, get awareness of your initial situation, and just, you know, have a more fun experience when you pay attention to what's going on around the map. Sure, it's gonna reduce the element of surprise, but it's fun having a tool like this, just to, you know, look at what's going on, which faction has been wiped out, which faction hasn't been wiped out. So it's got two useful purposes. Moving on, the next mod to talk about also concerns minor settlement battles and siege battles. There's actually two different mods that just remove the siege battles and minor settlement battles completely from the game. Don't just remove towers and barricades, but remove them from the game. So here we are. I'm besieging a settlement. Oh, look, the map layout. If I just click the encircle button, I go there. I see what kind of layout I get. Is an open field battle. And if we fight it, it will be an open field battle. Now, some people will object to this, right? Saying, oh, it's going to make things too easy. You remove the towers, you remove the barricades, you remove them completely, especially the walled settlements. But here's the thing to know about that. Siege battles and minor settlement battles are not difficult. If you're attacking them, sure, you may not be able to win instantly in some cases. Sure, you may not be able to win instantly in some cases, but most of the time, if you were to fight that army on an open field, you also may not be able to win instantly. See, the thing about the minor settlement battles and all the siege battles that currently exist in the game is they really favor the person who's laying siege, because you're causing attrition to a settlement, and you can use artillery to really do a significant amount of damage to the AI. But if you have to fight a minor settlement battle, believe it or not, you may actually have a more difficult campaign, substantially more difficult campaign on your hands, because having to deal with this constantly means like the AI at least is going to march against you in this particular case, right? So they're gonna present a challenge, they're going to present some issues, as opposed to the AI just being destroyed one unit at a time, because the AI does a pretty poor job in their placement in sieges. Now there is a mod that overhauls the sieges. By the way, I'm really tired of seeing the AI just dodge mortar shells that are difficult to see. Players may dodge spells, though it's interesting to note that Creative Assembly didn't make changes with spells because to make it them easier to dodge for players. But yeah, I do find it annoying to see how useless the mortars are. Maybe they need to change the way the projectiles work to make it more viable for players to actually land shots, as opposed to just waiting for the moment when the AI units are stacked up, because then you're just going to end up doing significant friendly fire. But yeah, removing siege battles completely, removing minor settlement battles, like you can just decide to remove minor settlement battles if you're just tired of it. You can decide to remove siege battles and keep minor settlement battles in the game. That is your decision. Now, I'm not sure, there might obviously be compatibility issues with it. The mod to remove siege battles is in a beta, but I really think, although siege battles have been part of Total War for a very long time, I think in general a lot of people could agree with the sentiment that they've generally not been all that great in the history of the game, right? That there's always been some issues to one degree or another when it comes down to it, and just removing them might be actually the best decision. But then of course we go back into the same problem that we used to have in Warhammer 2, which is that things do get dull if you're just fighting the same kind of pointless battles over and over again. I think what we really need in Warhammer is a combination of the two types. We need more field battles, but we also need to prevent all the battles from being those field battles. Like some variety would be nice, which you just don't have right now. Every settlement is either a minor settlement battle or a siege battle. And with the mod, you're just making every one of those a field battle. So you're back to Warhammer 2. Have we resolved anything with that situation? Sure, the field battles are significantly better to play, but I do think there's something to be discussed when it comes to the future of the game. Another mod that I can recommend is a camera zoom. Just improves the camera zoom. I can't show it here, but yeah, there is a camera zoom mod available, linked in the description as well. It just improves the camera. There's not really much worth talking about when it comes to that one. It's pretty self-explanatory. Now, there's some campaign mods to talk about. The first one is the reset skill mod. Just one button reset, one chance to reset your skills. You basically get a button over here that will reset character skills once per each character. You can only do it once. Now this is useful if you're confederating with a faction, but you realize that the lords they have, the heroes they have, don't necessarily have the best skills put in. But it can also be useful for certain factions, for certain lords, if you might want to go for certain skills early on. Like for instance this skill, you might want to go with that early on, but you won't use this in the late game. And so you can have a hero dedicated, or hero or lord built properly for the early game, and then once you get to the mid and late game, you can respec them. So for instance, if I click this, I can reset skills for Karl Franz, and obviously I can put the points wherever I want. That is the first mod to talk about things on a campaign level. Beyond that, there is also the public order penalty removal mod. See, when you're playing Total War Warhammer 3 on any higher difficulty, or any difficulty really, you have a public order penalty affected by the difficulty you're playing on. On Legendary, which this is at, that public order penalty is -8. The mod removes that. Removes it completely. Now, you might say, oh, this is going against the difficulty of the game, the design of the game, to which I reply, public order is a meaningless affair for quite a lot of actions, races, legendary lords. The ones that actually care about it, and the Empire is not in this category, but the ones that do care about it are the ones that are generally the weaker. Think of Kislev, the Dwarves, etc. Those are the ones. Well, Kislev has a way of dealing with public order, especially as Katrin, but as all of their legendary lords. But generally, it is the weaker factions, the weaker legendary lords, the weakest races that do get affected by this. So just removing it can be such a major quality of life change to your campaign. Yes, it means rebellions will happen, but guess what? Greenskins, Vampire Counts, Vampire Coast, Warriors of Chaos, Cafe, plenty of factions, plenty of races, don't care about it. Only some care about it, and honestly I think it's always been something that Creative Assembly did poorly. It was actually something they introduced, that modifier, they introduced it in Rome 2, if I remember. It was pretty poorly done there to begin with. And it continued to be done poorly in Warhammer 1, 2, and 3. Actually, one of the things that I like is that it does seem like with Three Kingdoms and Total War Saga Troy, they've actually moved away from this mentality, but for whatever reason, they've kept it in Warhammer 2 and 3, when really they should have gone away with it. As I said, public order only matters for certain races that already have enough issues. It can make the experience significantly more enjoyable for those races if you are playing them. The final mod that I want to talk about is one specifically related to the Dwarves. You're still going to play them pretty much the same. You're still going to get Grudges throughout your campaign. But what this mod does is remove the starting Grudges in the game. So the Grudge meter starts empty. No ancestral grudges, no severity, nonsense, none of that. You start with some substantial benefits and diplomatic relations, research rate, decent control, decent construction cost, all that. Obviously you won't get slayers. Now this combined with the public order penalty mod, removal mod, means that you can actually get good control, which means you can get good growth, because having high control will give you good growth, which is something dwarves desperately need. I would dare say that this combined with this mod that removes the starting grudges combined with the public order penalty mod makes dwarves actually playable as a race in Warhammer 3, because they're in a miserable state by default. It is pretty essential to get this one right. It is not a night and day difference in terms of bonuses. Yeah, the control is going to help, the research rate is going to help, though given how much research you have. 20%, yeah, it will make a difference, don't get me wrong. But dwarves really do need some early game benefits. They're fine in the late game, but they really, really struggle in the early game. That is their problem. And just fixing their public order penalty situation, and fixing their public order in general, their control situation, really helps them out. Now, the downside in this is that if you're playing, the downside of course is that you're just not going to be able to get the grudge rewards, like for instance the Master Rune of Spite that some of them may be able to pick up, as opposed to, you know, having to craft it. For instance, you can still get one crafted, of course. You can still get one crafted. Actually, there might be it might have been changed to being available of gold, but either way, you won't be able to get as many of the sweet runes that you would get from the rewards. But honestly, for all the benefits those special runes may have, I'm gonna just say it, I much prefer having good public order construction cost benefit, having good growth because of the public order situation, than having to deal with than having some runes. That's my perspective. There are different mods that do tackle grudges in different ways. Some just lower the intensity, but I think dwarves are just in such a piss poor state as a race right now, especially in the early game, that they desperately need the benefit that comes with starting with no grudges. And so just removing them from the very start will help your campaign a great deal. If you want to play dwarves in Warhammer Free, play it with this mod, and play it with the public order penalty removal mod. It is going to vastly improve your experience from my perspective. And that is all there is to say. Maybe I'll cover some more extensive mods, overhaul mods, siege rework mods, all that in the future, but none of these mods will substantially change the base game, so to speak. It changes the way you fight battles, the kind of battles you're fighting, but you're still fighting pretty much the same same army, same enemies, in much the same way. You're just not cheesing sieges, you're just not going through that miserable experience of siege battle after siege battle after siege battle. You're not going through the miserable experience of Grudges if you do install the mods that I've linked in this video. So Costin here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, enable notifications, and I'll see you next time.